Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. And today, on board Battleship New Jersey, we're joined by a very special guest.
Hi, I'm Frank Clegg, curator of the Battleship Missouri Memorial from Pearl Harbor, Hawaii.
Frank's been on board the battleship a couple of times, including when we were in dry dock, but we'd never been down here to Broadway or any of the engineering spaces. So while we came down here, we saw a lot of the crew art that's not normally on the tour route. And it's interesting. It's interesting to me that the crew art isn't largely about the same subjects throughout. You would think that the Navy would adopt like that one character that they're super into, Popeye or something like that. And yet the cartoons that they're drawing on New Jersey are very different from the ones that are being drawn on Missouri. Well, not entirely. It is universal to our ships that there are paintings of scantily clad ladies all over the ship. But we're not going to show any of those today. This is a family-friendly channel.
This is a PG video.
So we'll be focusing on the cartoon characters.
So on the Missouri, most of the crew art that we see, especially down in the engineering spaces on Broadway, were mostly painted by the Gulf War crew. The crew served on board during the Persian Gulf War. We see a lot of characters that were indicative of that time period. Specifically, we have a lot of Bart Simpsons on board. And the Simpsons cartoon didn't debut until 1989. So it makes sense that the 90-91 crew will be painting a lot of Bart Simpsons around as they're going home from the Gulf. In addition, we also have a few Tasmanian Devils as well painted. Again, a 1990s kind of popular cartoon character, but also because the Missouri stopped in Tasmania as she was basically as one of her port calls on her Persian Gulf deployment as well.
That's interesting. Battleship New Jersey, most of the sailor art that we are aware of existing on the ship also comes from the 80s time period. It seems like there was a mechanism for being able to get authorization to do something like this in a big public place, as opposed to earlier when that might not have been the case. We do have some examples of 1960s era sailor art. Of course, you guys weren't around to get that, but we had a Roadrunner on one of our engines. That gets painted over in the 80s, so it's gone. We've got pictures of it, but it's not there anymore. Really interesting to me that you guys have Simpsons stuff because we do not. Battleship New Jersey is only decommissioned a year ahead of you guys, but 89-90 when the Simpsons are airing, New Jersey's on her last active deployment. So we're sailing in the Western Pacific, we go all the way to the Persian Gulf and back, so they probably don't get to watch that live. And then when we get back in 1990, they start the inactivation process, and by early 91, the ship's out of service. So they're likely not adding more sailor art at that time. In fact, we've got some sailor art on the ship that is incomplete, where you can see it's partially painted and then partially penciled in. You can see that they were working on more of it, and they get the orders to decommission the ship, and they just stop.
Yeah, so for us on the Missouri, pretty much there are no crew art left behind from the 40s and the 50s. When the ship was recommissioned, most of that was scoured out, either painted over or whatever it may be in the spaces that they originally were. But even interestingly, there's a difference between the recommissioning crew and the decommissioning crew art. We have a lot of recommissioning crew members who come aboard and they go into their spaces and they recall having a piece of art they painted that has been painted over or altered by the subsequent crews that served on board during what we call the modern era. And of course, during the return from the Persian Gulf, there was a lot of, kind of victory-centric, combat-tested art that was painted by that crew as they returned from that deployment. So, yeah, it's very interesting, indicative of the crew's culture, the very specific time periods of when they were active, and even just kind of the mindset of the young men who were serving on board each ship at the time.
I guess that's right for us, too. Our last time firing the guns in action was off Lebanon in 83-84. So that crew, obviously very important time in their lives, they paint a lot of stuff like a map of the Middle East inside Turret 1 that shows their trips. Well, that's not there today. In its place is a Grim Reaper style artwork that's pretty famous. But again, like you said, there was the earlier part of the ship's crew, and then there was the later ship's crew. And it's probably almost exclusively that later ship's crew art that has been preserved on all of our ships.
One of the most remarkable pieces that I was aware of being altered is in number 4 fire room on the DFT tank as a large Tasmanian devil that was painted. And talking to the boiler techs who served in that space over the modern era, it was altered. Originally it was painted to have Taz It was standing. He was like had one foot on a car, and he was holding a tire and taking a bite out of it. And the Gulf War crew altered it so that he was standing on a 60-inch projectile and holding a Tomahawk missile instead. So, and then they painted over him Operation Desert Storm as to kind of commemorate their service. So again, we've had recommissioning crew members who served in that space come and tell me what it originally looked like, and then we can see the result of the modifications made by the Gulf War crew.
Now that's interesting. I'm not aware of any artwork. It doesn't mean it didn't happen, but I'm not aware of any artwork like that that's touched up on our ship. Like obviously the turrets, because of the temperature differential, that paint flakes off pretty quickly, and there have been repairs to the paintings. But I'm not, those repairs are very much in the vein of the original, not like completely changing them. That said, there is one painting in engine room number 3 that's of the steaming demon. It's a relatively small piece of artwork like this, and somebody struck out, like painted over the demon's head and the word demon on it. I guess bad luck. We think that might have happened while the ship was in mothballs. So that's the closest thing to an artwork alteration that we've had. So obviously the type of artwork that's being painted on our ships is very specific to the culture in the Navy and in the wider country at that time. What character do you think is a good representation of the Navy that you would expect to see on all modern ships today, where we can't find such a character on our ships even though they're serving at the same time period? Let us know in the comment section down below. I do think that Bart Simpson and his devil-may-care attitude, getting away with stuff, is a really perfect encapsulation of the enlisted sailor.
Yeah, one of the Bart Simpson art is basically we kick some and like kind of like, you know, random symbols, and he was given the peace sign, and he's basically yeah, it was a victory lap for the crew.
Let us know who you think is a good character in the comment section down below. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses and private individuals. We really appreciate their support, and there's a link in the description below to support Battleship Missouri and their ongoing restoration efforts. So feel free to send them some support, and you can support Battleship New Jersey by liking, sharing, subscribing so more people find about our museum and the channel. Thanks for watching.